Yeah, so really, this is going to be our first Simply Successful event. Really, the idea and the name behind the reason for the name behind the event is what I found talking to all kinds of successful people, whether that's in real estate or really any business at all. It's actually really breaks down to a couple simple things in their business that has gotten them to where they are now. And so I don't want to overcomplicate it. I want to make sure that we're really just diving into some of the key things that'll make the biggest difference, the 20 of the 80, 20-80 rule. And yeah, so Rick is our first guest. Super honored to have him on here and just talk about his business, where he's at today, how he got started in the world of real estate, and how he found his success. So Rick, thanks for coming on, and we're super excited to have you here.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Cole, and thanks everybody that's online too. So yeah, I'm excited to be a part of this and yeah, share what I did. And everything that we share is great because it kind of gives you the gives you the idea where to kind of move forward, where I slowed down, or how to sidestep some of the faults and the pitfalls that we ran into. But
yeah,
sounds like the first question, or one of the big questions, is how did I get started, and what did that look like for me right out of the gate, right?
Yeah, and I'll preface this a little bit too. I mean, I've spent months in your office, months in your classes on Wednesday mornings, and other classes that we've held too. And it took a while for this story to actually just organically show up in our conversations. And once I did hear it, I felt like it was something that really many people that are getting into real estate can really relate to. So yeah, I'd love to hear kind of how you got started and a little bit of the backstory there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll kind of start from the beginning and how it worked out and progressed for me. So I came from a good job doing construction, and yeah, it was a good job. I made good money per hour. I had a company truck. I got paid every Friday, weeks paid vacation every year, benefits. Like, if you put that on a whiteboard, it looks good, and it was good. And notice how I keep emphasizing good, because it was only good, right? And I wanted something great. For me, it was kind of an eye opener in construction, where I kind of reached that top level of what that industry would offer me for pay, for anything. And I knew I was kind of at the ceiling for that line of work. And I'm not really one of those people that I see like, this is good enough, right? I wanted something that was great. So fast forward a little bit, my mom happens to be in real estate. She's been in for quite a while. She's pretty successful as well. And she talked me into getting my real estate license. She told me, oh, it'll be easy. It'll be this, right? And I said, okay, so I'm gonna make this happen. I'm up for a challenge and up for a change. Her life looks good. I like the flexibility she has, the income, being a people person. It's way better than digging ditches, working in the dirt, doing all the hard manual labor that I was doing. So, again, a little background is, at this point in my life, I'm engaged. I've got 2 kids, and everybody's really counting on me to provide, as for the household. I really wanted to do this real estate thing, but I didn't see an easy opportunity to jump into it, right? We got to get our class time in, the 90 hours. So for me, I said, okay, let's do this, right? I was working, I don't know, 60 plus hours a week in construction, plus driving from Camano Island to Seattle. I mean, my days were full, plus being a dad and weekends and this stuff. But what I did was I signed up for real estate every Saturday for 9 Saturdays in a row for 10 hours a Saturday. I went into class, I sat down, I did my thing, finally got done with that. And all the while, don't forget, the reason I'm sharing this is it was hard, but then we'll get to the point of why it was a great payoff, right? So in the beginning, it was hard putting the kids to bed, getting home 6, 7 o'clock at night, having dinner, saying hi to the kids, putting them to bed at 8 or 9, grabbing my real estate book and sitting out in the living room with the lamp on, reading and studying and doing the practice quizzes. I did this for the whole time I was in the class till I could pass, right? And even after I passed, you got to take the state exam, and I was cramming for that too, doing all this in between construction and normal life. Finally, I get licensed. So here I am licensed. And as we know, it's about on your best day, it's 30 days for a paycheck in real estate, right? If I meet you today, Cole, you walk into my office, you're already qualified with Movement Mortgage, and you're ready to buy a home. Even if you walked in today, we went out, found the right home today, it was accepted today, it's still going to be about 30 days before I see that paycheck. Now, I knew that going into it. I didn't have the ability to just stop my 9 to 5 job, my construction job anyways, and put all my eggs in this basket for real estate. There are a lot of people I've heard that say, hey, you can't, have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Maybe that works for some people. Maybe some people have the ability. Maybe if I was a single guy and I had options, those just weren't my options. And I wasn't willing to risk the income and our well-being for this new line of work. So is how that worked for me is I still continued my job is in construction. And is what I did was I would take a backpack and I would pack, some slacks, a button-up shirt, hair gel, deodorant, sometimes a razor, you know what I mean? Like all these things to clean myself up. But I would always have this backpack in my work truck, my 1-ton, hyper rack, all this stuff. And I would go out to the job sites, running heavy equipment, digging, doing what I did. And I would get calls from clients from time to time. Plus I was lead genning too. Let's not forget that. So I was getting some calls from time to time where a buyer's like, hey, I want to go see this home today at 6 o'clock. Can you schedule it? Yeah. Jump on my phone. I'd schedule a showing. And I would leave the job site, go to 7-Eleven or Starbucks or wherever had a nice bathroom. And I'd go in there with my backpack, wash all the dirt off my face, the blue from the pipe work, all these things, put on my clothes, sometimes a little wrinkly, what have you. But I would drive to the showing and I'd park like 2 blocks away so they didn't see my work truck, right? Because people have this idea about part-time agents, and so did I. So I would park down the street, I'd stand on the porch, be there early, show them the house, have the conversations, and then be done with it, right? But I would do this all the time. Anytime after work that I could do showings, I would do it. My whole weekends were booked up with doing cold calls Saturday and Sunday morning from 8 to 11. I just threw myself in there because I have a plan to make the jump, right? I didn't stay stagnant. Like this is just how I'm going to do real estate, is a little construction, little real estate. I wanted to be all in. So I was giving it all the time that I had to make this happen. And the best way that I could think of making this happen is I needed at least 3 months of reserves, right? When I say reserves, I mean rent, if you're renting at the time, mortgage, whatever it is, paying for your house, your cell phone bills, your grocery, your gas, food, kids, whatever your total monthly bills look like, times 3, put away. And so I got my first sale, which was on East Casino Road in Everett. It was like $135,000 condo. I closed. I think I walked away with $3,000 commission. And this was back in 2014, I think, beginning of 15, but it was back in that time frame. Now it's funny to look back at that now as that being, a commission amount, $3,000. But here's where my gratitude comes in, right? I know how hard I was working, and I think I was making like $32 an hour, paid every Friday. I mean, like I said, it was a good job, just wasn't great. So I know I was bringing in like $4,200 a month in construction, but I know how much energy and effort went into not getting my license, but working with this one client. How many phone calls I made, how many showings I did with them, and then it produced this $3,000 paycheck. That was probably all in a total of 8 hours, I would guess, like between the phone calls, the showings, etc., carrying the contract, probably 8 to 10 hours, something like that, for $3,000. And I'm looking at 60+ hour work weeks for all month, and I'm bringing in like 4,200 or something a month. So it was real easy to look at this and go, this is the ticket, right? But I didn't play with that money. My first commission check, I put it in savings, and I didn't look at it. I just kept living off construction. Then I got another closing, put it away, got another closing, put it away, until it stacked up enough that I was prepared to make a logical choice to make the jump, right? And that's when I put in my notice at construction, told my wife, told everybody, because once you tell people it's real, right? When you have a plan, you start talking about it, you tell people it's real, and it was real for me. And I did everything the best that I could to make this happen. And when I jumped in, I knew I had 3 months. So it's going to take me 1 month to close. So that means for sure within 2 months, I need to find somebody, get them in contract, and make it happen. And my whole plan was if I closed at least one a month, at least one a month, I was still bringing in the same income as I was before, but I've got all the flexibility now too. Sometimes it's good flexibility, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it's working on weekends, sometimes I get a Tuesday off and I can take my kid to school. But that's how it started for me. So I didn't just walk in, hang my license, and just hit the ground running. That was my progression from working a W-2 job into a sole proprietor, into a business owner. And then everything started kind of taking off from there.
Cool. Awesome. And I want to mention to you guys, for anyone listening, if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat, but I've got a couple here lined up too. One of the things that I think is toughest for people that have thought about starting out, or they're kind of on the fence about it, is they're in your situation where they have a good enough life. Like, it's good enough in terms of their job. They work a decent amount of hours, that there's not a lot of pain attached to what they're doing. And so what happens is they'll have this idea of, oh, I want to be a real estate agent, real estate professional, but there's not enough pain to push them over the edge of actually making that jump. Did you find that you made that jump very quickly? Did it happen very fast for you? Did it happen over a month, 2 months, 3 months of really thinking about it before you actually dived in? Where do you feel like you actually officially made that jump from the time of where you actually first thought about the idea, or your mom mentioned the idea of becoming an agent?
So how long did it take me to actually start the process of getting my real estate license?
Correct.
From the time it was mentioned?
Yep.
Honestly, I'd say it was within about a month. My mom, I don't know if you've ever met her, but Michelle Torset, she's a great agent too, but she's very persistent, right? In business and in family. So I think she mentioned it to me, I think the first time about a month before I actually went in and started my classes. So first time she mentioned it, I kind of thought about it, sort of thought it was maybe for me, maybe not. There's lots of unknowns about switching industries completely. It was a little bit of fear, of course, because I came from 17 years in land development where I'm secure and I know my job inside and out. I'm not nervous. I'm very happy with it and very secure, to jumping into a complete different line of work that is very foreign to me. Contracts, people, face-to-face, buying and selling homes, things like that. But to answer your question is, I think within a month of the first time it was mentioned to me is when I jumped into getting my license, and my first thought on getting my license is it's just like your driver's license, right? Once you get it, you got it,
Yeah.
So I even told myself, hey, let's get it so I have it. Never know what the future is going to bring if I want to do investments or do construction, or down the road if I want to use it. Let's just get it so I have it, right? That was my first thought of telling myself, hey, no matter what you're thinking, let's move forward with this and see what comes of it. So,
Sure.
about a month. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. And Mariana mentioned in here too. She said that she's in that spot where she's comfortable mostly with what she's doing right now and needs the extra push. How, throughout your journey in real estate, how have you found ways to push yourself to keep growing? Because for a lot of people, doing a deal a month is comfortable, and that's a really good business at a deal a month. So how have you found that you've pushed yourself past those levels of comfort, and what ways have you continued to push yourself and keep yourself motivated to do more?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So like I said, I come from an understanding of being grateful, right? Like I said, when I started comparing the checks, because I guess if you know how hard you've worked in your life with a W-2 and what you brought in for a paycheck, it's very easy for me to look at that and I don't forget, and I make sure I don't forget almost 10 years later how hard I worked in the rain, in the mud, in the snow, the driving, the dirt work, all the stuff. I get grateful when I see what I made in real estate and the flexibility for it, right? So so that's a big piece. So once I got into real estate, um, I treated it like a job. That's, I know that sounds funny to say, but when I got into it, I'm used to being on the job sites at 7 a.m., no matter where it is. If I was in Camino and job sites in Bellevue or Snoqualmie or wherever it is, I had to be there at 7 a.m. I had to be there at 6:30 to be ready to start at 7 a.m. So I had this job mentality. And so that's how I treated real estate. Like I showed up at 7 o'clock in the morning, just like my normal jobs. I packed my lunch, I was prepared for the day, right? And I started building out a schedule, because the hardest thing for me when I jumped into real estate was, what the hell do I do now? Like with my day, right? Because I'm used to having structure. I'm used to having someone say, hey, here's the job sites you're going to go to. Here's the lots you're going to dig. Here's your punch list. All this needs to be done by the end of the day, right? There's something to be said about having someone tell you what to do, but there's also something to be said about a roadmap being laid out for you on what to do in the day. And when we get put into real estate, now you're your own boss, right? And I would ask myself these questions that I would hear from time to time, like, if you saw what you did in a day, would you hire yourself, right? And that's always stuck in my mind. And I was like, yeah, what if I seen what my daily tasks look like, am I somebody that I would keep on payroll? So I had to treat it like that, because I was my only employee. It's me. So as I jumped into those things, I treated it like a job. I had to put some structure together so I knew if I was winning or if I was losing, right? We hear these, I immersed myself in all the classes that I could. And the two things that I was most worried about in real estate or the two biggest things that I immersed myself in, one was contracts, right? Because if I knew the contracts, then I had an understanding of how to do this job and how to best help my clients and be educated. The other piece to understanding what to do and how to do it is, how do I talk to people to get them to want to work with me so I can do these contracts and these things? So understanding scripts or dialogue and conversations and human interactions was number one on my list. Number two on my list was, how do I take care of them when they raise their hand and say, yes, I'd like to work with you? Those are my two biggest things. And I was always worried, because I came from a job that I was secure and I knew everything in. I was worried, what if the client asks me a basic question that I should know the answer to, and they know the answer and I don't know the answer, right? This thought of being inferior to the client when you're supposed to be a professional in the field. So these things drove me to learn more and forced myself to do more, and started getting a schedule, because I was used to having a schedule and I had to know what was happening next in my day and what to plan for. And like I said, it comes down to structure. Knowledge and structure were key foundational points in my business to get it up and running.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I think one of the things you mentioned earlier too, that a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of when they get started, is they see the selling sunsets, they see all the different TV shows about real estate agents, and it looks like this glamorous life, and they hang out and they just go get happy hour all the time, and they drive the fancy cars, and they don't necessarily see what it takes to get there, because those first couple of years are a grind, and you're figuring it out and you're uncomfortable. You maybe don't know everything that you're talking about. And what would you say are the structure that you would give somebody if they were starting out? Like, what are the things that they would time block out in their day to become successful and to really stick to the right path? Because it's ultimately, discipline leads to freedom, but they need to have the discipline first to get the freedom.
100%.
How would you lay out like a daily structure for somebody that's maybe new or trying to get their business in a better shape? How would you structure out their day?
Awesome question. So, and I love that. As you were explaining that to me, I was picturing, that picture that you see in everybody's office, the tip of the iceberg, that's
Yeah.
And then it shows everything underneath.
Yeah.
They got you there. And my friends that are like, oh man, you're killing it in real estate. Man, I'm thinking about joining real estate, and you just smile.
Yeah.
Like, awesome. Well, good for
Sure.
you.
Yeah.
Good for you. But they have no idea of the hard work in real estate, just like any business, startup business. I mean, you got a couple years of grinding. There
Yep.
are some anomalies, people that jump into this and just miraculously kill it, or have a mom that's a lender that's bringing, qualified people to them, or what have you. But for me, if I had to give some good pointers on getting business up and running, number one, absolute number one, is lead generation. And I know that that term gets thrown around so much. You get out of this business what you put into it. Again, you get out of this what you put into it. If you are just showing up at 10 o'clock and you're kind of trying or floundering around a little bit for a couple hours, and this goes on for weeks, and you're like, man, I don't know why I'm not getting business, because you're not lead genning, and you're not being purposeful in what you're doing, right? So for me, I'm a cold call guy, right? Or I was. Luckily, my business has kind of evolved a bit, and now my phone actually rings, and it's a different business model. But in the beginning, I didn't have money, right? I was still paycheck to paycheck in my construction job. Is what I had was, I had this cell phone, and I had access to the MLS, and I knew what a canceled and expired listing was, and I had time. Is all I could do was, I could go door knocking, I could go do open houses, I could do all these forms of lead generation, but the way I could reach out to the most people in the least amount of time was making calls. So that's what I started doing, which really helped me, right? I got used to being uncomfortable, right? If you're uncomfortable, you're growing. That's number one in this business, right? If you're uncomfortable, you're doing things that are out of your norm. You're not being complacent. You're moving forward, pushing yourself. But making these calls, I would go through 100 calls and I'd get 100 no's. Then the 101st call, someone would be like, yeah, let's meet. Let's talk about that. So I would go out there, and then I do my listing appointment. And I did that relentlessly, right? Like it says in the MREA, right? Like, have a boring business so you can have an extraordinary life, right? So the boring business that they're talking about is keep doing the same thing every day, right? Do the same thing every day. What works? And it will. It's all a numbers game. It's truly, truly, truly a numbers game. You do so many calls, you do so many interactions, you're bound to get so many conversations that lead to business or appointments, to closings, etc. But you have to do something where you are talking to people every day, and not just the same people. If you're talking to the same people, that's lead follow-up, right? Big difference than lead generation. Lead generation are people you haven't spoke to, and you have to keep having these waves come in daily. And before you know it, you start building what's called a database. Then you start following up with that database. And that's how things start to grow and start to evolve. But you have to be relentless on this lead generation part. Like I said, it was calls, and those calls were mixed in with open houses. I love open. I'm doing an open house this weekend still, 10 years in the business. I'm still doing open houses myself. I still call other agents, other brokerages. I hunt, I do these things because I know I pull clients out of there. I've closed, I don't even know how many deals I've closed out of just open houses, right? So taking it back to your question, I know it was a really long-winded answer, but lead generation, number one, you've got to talk to people. Number two, know what you're talking about, right? You've got to understand the contracts. You got to understand how you can help them, right? You're supposed to be the professional in this field, and they're looking to you for answers. Hey, I got a home I want to buy, but I got a home that I have to sell. I don't want to be putting my stuff in storage. I don't know how to make this happen. What do you think's the value of my home? What's this? What's this? You got to be able to answer these questions as the professional in the field. So understanding the contracts, right? And the third part is, you might have somebody that raises their hand that said they want to work with you, and you know how to carry the contract. There's that whole part that's in between, that's a relationship, right? How do you relationship with people? You got to learn to smile, carry yourself, make them comfortable, make yourself comfortable. It should be a fun job, right? That's why I'm in it. If it wasn't fun, if it wasn't something I liked, I wouldn't be here. So that's huge for me. I had to teach myself how to not talk like I was on a construction site anymore. That's a big deal. You know what I mean? There was a lot of four-lettered words are not a part of my vocabulary anymore. I had to learn how to dress the part, walk the part, talk the part, be comfortable in my own skin, and not flood my brain with what ifs. What if this person doesn't want me to call him? What if I asked a dumb question? What if this? What if myself to death? But that's what I would do if I really wanted to get business. I would put a calendar together, and I would time block lead generation, whatever that is that you're going to choose. But don't tell yourself it's whatever. Be specific, right? The brain likes specifics, and we learned that in the MREA. If you're going to do lead generation, what kind of lead generation? Open house, door knocking, cold calls, whatever it is. And of that, what are you going to do? One open house? What day? Sunday. What time? 12 to 3. How many this month? 4. Which days? This. I'm going to do some cold calls. Okay, to who? For how many? For how long? When do you know you're winning? When you've had 10 answers? When you've got one appointment? When you've completed an hour? Like you have to set these checkpoints so you have data to look back on, so you can have what's called a predictive business, right? You can have a predictive business off of these numbers.
Yeah, that was when you mentioned there, when do you know you're winning? That was a huge light bulb for me that I think you mentioned a couple weeks ago in one of the classes that we did. And it's something that I don't think people are aware enough of in this business. Is it's very delayed gratification in terms of the action you do now versus when you see the result of that action. It could be as soon as a week or even a day if you're at an open house and you get a lead, but sometimes that action doesn't show up until 3 months later is usually the timeline that it usually ends up working out on. And for me, it was difficult because when I got started, you would do these actions, and for especially people my age, they want immediate gratification in one way or another. Some kind of proof what I'm doing is working, or I'm getting results from it. And so that was a big light bulb for me, is just setting those small goals of, even if it's just a number of contacts a day, or setting the open house and setting it on the calendar, 12 to 3, you knock it out. And having just a checklist of those things, I think, is super helpful, because we sometimes don't see the results of these actions for months to come. So how would you track that? Did you just have like a paper pen, you just tracking stuff like that? Do you do a sheet, or how does it work out for you?
Yeah. I mean, I started out as when I was doing my cold calls right out of the gate, it was as crude as a yellow notepad, pen, and tally marks, and I would start counting my calls, and not just my calls, but my answers to the calls, right? Because then I would be able to say, I got one appointment out of, was it this many calls or this many conversations, right? And if I wasn't getting appointments, then I could know, well, I'm not getting the answers. Who I'm calling is probably not the right people, or I'm getting a lot of answers and I'm getting no appointments. It's probably the conversations I'm having. It's easier to pinpoint where the problem is, or what you need to work on, right? So yes, I would start with, I started out in the beginning with one appointment a week for a 7-day period. When I was brand new, it was like, if I could get one appointment a week, I feel good, and I would get, hopefully 4 appointments a month, and this was, again, working 2 jobs. So I was trying to be, what I thought was a realistic goal, but that's how I had it set. So maybe Saturday when I got up, and by the way, if anybody's thinking about making calls, hit the weekends. I know everybody wants the weekends off, but that's when everybody's home and they're answering the phone. So if you've got any lead gen you want to do, the weekends are where you kill it. I'm telling you from experience, right? But I would wake up Saturday morning. I try not to call people before 8 a.m., but my calls would run into 10 o'clock. And if I had already I'm at the end of the week and I've got no appointments, guess what? 10 o'clock might turn into 12, might turn into 1, might turn into 2, whatever it was. I couldn't get off the phone till I had this one appointment for the week, right? And my close ratio was probably 1 out of 4 appointments, maybe, getting a listing or a buyer that wanted to work with me. It was kind of 1 out of 4. I was still coming into myself, how to use my language and conversation and my abilities and stuff. But yeah, I had to set a checkpoint. because if I didn't set checkpoints, I didn't know if I was winning. I didn't know if I was doing a good job, or I had to have something where I go, okay, guess what? I don't want 4 appointments a month now. I want 8. So what do I need to do to get 8? Well, I can look back at these tally marks. This many calls would get me this many answers. This many answers would get me this many appointments. And of these appointments, I could get this many people signed. And of this many people that were signed and to market or in contract, this many of them would close. And it was a way to build a predictable business. So if I wanted twice of what I was getting, what did I have to do? Double it, right? So I mean, it's funny to try and wrap your head around something as volatile as, you know, phone calls and meetings, like to get a predicted business, but it's doable. It's very, very doable. You know? Yeah.
Well, you gotta track it though too, is the thing. Is you gotta track it and make sure you stay on tracking that, because that's how you create that predictiveness in the business, and that's how you know, well, if I don't have any appointments at the end of this week, that means I didn't make enough calls. Or it could be that maybe the conversion on those calls was less, so you might need to change up your scripting or how you're saying certain things. Follow up to that, I think that cold calls is one of the best ways to get real estate conversations very quickly. It's least amount of time. In many cases, it's very low cost. It's pretty efficient overall. But from my experience, people that I know, majority of agents either don't like cold calls, don't do cold calls. What's your advice for somebody who's anti cold call to potentially get into cold calling and making those calls? How would you guide somebody who's just really not comfortable with it, but they feel like they should or need to do that?
Sure. So specifically on the cold call part, here's what I tell myself, and here's what I would tell other agents when I was on a big team. Whoever you're calling tonight, when you go home from work, they're not going to be at your house sitting at the dinner table. This weekend, when you go out with your friends, you're not going to see them. Thanksgiving rolls around, you're not going to see them. You probably spend more time in your head thinking about the call that you just had than the person on the other line that already forgot your name and they're on with their day. So we put a lot of stock in thinking this way, right? It's going to be uncomfortable, but putting yourself in those more high pressure situations, it's like hitting the gym for your brain. You know, you're working that muscle, you're used to a faster response because you have their attention for maybe 30 seconds, 15 to 30 seconds. You have the opportunity to win them over or lose the call, right? So it teaches you to pick up on tonality. It teaches you to pick up on the cadence, how fast they're talking, how slow they're talking, what they're talking about, and get your point across without asking yes or no questions, right? There's the magic on top. Try not to ask yes or no questions. Ask questions, and that's how you steer the conversation, right? Well, why were you thinking about moving? You know, why do you think your property didn't sell? If this home did sell, where were you planning on moving to? What do you think stopped the home from selling, right? And it teaches you to carry a conversation. It teaches you to steer it by asking questions, and it prepares you for any type of real estate conversation, because even if you don't like making the cold calls, the scripting and the questions and the conversations I have on the phone, they're almost word for word the same thing when I'm sitting down with the listing appointment, especially if somebody that came off the market, right? It's the same conversations that I would ask on the phone. But the beauty of this is I've worked it so much into my brain that when I'm sitting down and having a conversation with someone, my brain used to wander and try and think of what's the next good question I could ask somebody to keep this conversation going. And I would totally lose everything that they were telling me because I'm thinking of the next thing I'm going to say. So now, fast forward, I've trained myself to, I'm not worried. There's literally like 5 to 10 questions people ever get asked commonly. You only need to know 5 to 10 answers or responses, objection handlers. But it would leave me open to listen to what their have, wants, and needs were, and actually communicate with them and treat them with a relationship, not contractual, you know? and make them feel that way, like I'm really listening. Awesome. So
Hmm.
you get into a place with an acre of property because you plan on raising dogs, right? So it was blue healers, you said, right? Yeah, it was awesome.
Hmm.
How long have you been doing that? It allows you to really get into their world and make everybody comfortable. So
Yeah.
that'd be a little bit of my answer on the cold call part of it.
Yeah, that's a good segue into the next question I had, which I'll start with a quote from one of my favorite guys, Alex Hormozy. Is the quote essentially is the questions you ask dictate the problems you solve. And I'm going to remix that a little bit and say that the quality of the questions you ask also dictate the quality of the answer you receive as well. Um, what are some of your favorite questions to ask during a conversation with a potential lead, whether that's, we could say, listing or buyer? Potentially, for example, I think one of the common ones with cold calling is the expired or canceled. So what kind of questions are you asking expired, canceled sellers, and how are you keeping that conversation going?
Yeah. So number one, I kind of jump into the conversation, and mine is always, hey, this home seller, is it still for sale? That's my opening question. Hey, Cole, this is Rick with Keller Williams. I was giving you a call about this property here on Main Street. Did this home sell, or is it still for sale? Right? I know the answer to that, whether it's sold or not sold. But to the person on the other side, they instantly want to go, did it sell? No, it didn't sell. What, is it still for sale? Well, I don't want to hang up on this person. What if they have somebody that's interested? Why would he ask me if it's still for sale? It gets the cogs moving, right? That's my opening statement. Yeah, no, it's not for sale anymore. Great. Well, what happened? When are you planning on getting the home back on the market? Right? I already assume that they're going to. I don't say, would you like to? I say, great. What are your plans for getting this home back on the market? Listen, right? Then they go into, well, we don't want to sell anymore, right? We don't want to sell anymore. We're not looking to list. Here's your response to that. What changed? Right? Only a few times out of thousands of calls have I ever had someone say, that's none of your business. But just to ask, well, what changed for you, Cole? Because something changed. At some point, Cole had goals and plans to sell this house, and you were excited. Whatever emotion or piece of your life that pushed you to want to sell this home was enough that you listed this property. So I would ask, well, what changed for you? Zip it and listen, because they're about to unload on whatever the objection is, right? We talk about objections and conditions, two different things. Condition cannot be changed. I lost my job. I can't afford to sell the house and qualify for a new one. I just got a divorce. It's messy. I can't do anything right now. I broke my leg. I'm out of work for 6 months. I can't fix those things. That's a condition. An objection is, I don't want to because, okay, what was because? I don't want to because I couldn't find the next home I was looking for. So, it's just not out there. So thanks for calling, but I got to let you go. Okay, well, let me grab you real quick, Cole. Where were you looking at? If you don't mind me asking. Well, I was thinking about, Arlington. Great. So what was your price range? This. So I'm getting them talking again. Now I'm triggering their emotions of excitement, right? They were excited at one point to get into Arlington and get into this spot. So I'm trying to raise their excitement a little bit, and then I'm going to hit them with some logic. So great, you're looking in this area, Cole. Well, let me ask you this. If I were able to find you this home in Arlington at 650 on 2 acres of property in this style home, if I could find this for you, you would want to sell, isn't that right? That they're either going to comply with it or they're going to give you the next objection. And I'm cutting out the objections. Whatever they tell me is an objection, I handle it as soon as I hear it. Then I move on to the next objection. I don't wait for them to unload 20 or 30 of them and then try and go back and answer each question because it's not doable, So, Cole, if I found this property, which I find lots of properties on and off the market all the time, just like I'm calling you, Mr. Canceled and Expired, I do this with my buyers as well. So you can understand, I know a lot about what's for sale on the market and what's off the market, just like you. So
Yep.
if I find this home, would you be open to selling? Well, we don't want to, we tried selling for 600,000. We couldn't get what we wanted for the home. Okay, so if I could find this other home in Arlington and I could justify, didn't say I could get, if I could justify the sale price of 600 for your home here in Marysville, you would want to sell. You see how it keeps whittling down their questions? And I'm
Yep.
serious by the questions I'm asking, right? It wasn't
Mhm.
just, hey, would you like to relist your home with me? Very different conversation.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit on kind of how some of the conversations go. And the cool
Yeah.
thing about cold calls too, I know we're spending some time on this, but the cool thing about cold calls is you find people that may not want to buy or sell right now, but they do in the future. Now you're building database. They say,
Mhm.
I do not want to list my home, but if you find somebody that wants to buy a home like mine for this price, let me know. Great. So now I've got value to this off-market person. When I have my buyers that can't find what they're looking for, I say, hey, got this other home that said they'd sell for the price you're looking for. Now I've connected them and now I've showed value to my buyer because I
Mhm.
found off market. I've showed value to this seller that that I spoke to, and who do you think they're going to want to work with when they sell their home and go to buy the next one, right?
You. Yeah.
This lead generation tree that comes from cold calls,
Mhm.
right? For
Mhm.
me, that was where I found my aha and my end.
For sure. Yeah, that was one of the things too. And I know you mentioned before that Derek Lipsky was one of your big inspirations and
Yeah.
resources for cold calls. And when I started watching some of his YouTube videos, it was just like the first objective is just to keep the conversation going. And then as the second part of the objective really is you're just identifying the reasons why they didn't make the transaction happen just by keeping the conversation going. So
Yeah.
because they would try and get off the phone and he was really quick to ask him another question to keep it going. So I saw it. I was like, man, yeah, he's just a bulldog with getting that question in there before they hang up the phone because it does keep them talking. And I mean, the video I saw, he was definitely answered the phone very tired. I'm sure he'd been called by 100 other agents that week. And just because Derek kept asking questions and kept the conversation moving, it turned into a conversation where the guy was like, "Oh yeah, well just come out tomorrow and we'll
Yeah.
take a look."
Yeah. And
It was crazy.
some of my favorite lines, and anybody that watches this, feel free to steal it. But when I'm talking to a canceled, expired, or something like that, and I'm trying to get to the appointment, it's like this: Cole, you seem like a really smart guy. You are definitely not going to make a decision that doesn't make sense. Am I right? Right?
Yep.
Exactly. So let's meet this Friday at 4 o'clock, unless 6 is better. Right. So I gave him an
Boom.
out, and I'm like, hey, I didn't say you have to work with me, and you're smart. No one
Yep.
said you have to make this decision. You're not going to
Yeah.
make a decision that doesn't make sense. Let's see if this makes sense, right? And I'd use that line. It's very hard to come back from that line and be like, no, I don't make good decisions. I don't want to meet with you, right?
Yeah.
So that was a big piece of it. And since you mentioned Derek Lipsky, when I got into this business too, there was
Hmm.
nobody that was doing what myself and Mitch and stuff like
Yeah.
that do with the offices to teach. We taught scripts and cold calls and conversations and all these things. There's nobody there when I jumped in that did that. I would
Sure.
jump on YouTube and I would listen
Hmm.
to Eric Lipsky, Jeff Glover. I'd listen to Windermere, John L. Scott. I would listen to any brokerage, any agent that was
Hmm.
sharing their point of view on cold calls, open houses, buyers consults, listing appointments, and I would just put in my headphone in my car or on my phone and just listen to this stuff. And I would
Yeah.
just take pieces of what I heard and make it into my own, right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, we got a follow up here from Khalil. So he said, following Cole's question, could you possibly give some pointers regarding the appointment itself, how to increase your numbers? I'm assuming in terms of conversion, and leave them with value or a differentiating factor about yourself from other agents.
Okay, so I think what I grabbed out of most of that was was kind of how best to win the
Yes.
appointment, more or
Yep.
less.
Yep.
So to win the appointment, you really need to listen. And I know this goes right back into what we talked about, but you have to have the right questions to ask, because they're not going to give you the answers if you don't ask the right questions, right? So realistically, if they say, hey, I'm interviewing 4 agents today, maybe you start off with, what exactly are you looking for in your next agent? Why can't you just flat out ask them what it is that they're expecting instead of shooting from the hip and thinking I'm going to hit all these broad points? You can still hit those, but it'd be nice to know what's important to them, right? And ask them, what is it that you're looking for in the next agent? What, and this is some of the script questions, right? What did the last, if it was a canceled, expired, or someone that worked with a different agent before, what did they do that you didn't like? They're going to tell you. What do you wish they would have done? Here's where the secret sauce comes in, right? What do you wish that agent would have done? They're going to tell you. Open houses, better communication, this. Guess what? That's what you do, right? That's whatever they said they wish they did, that's part of your value prop. Well, I do all of this, plus communication is key for me. I speak with my clients twice a week on these days. I do open houses twice on the first week it's open, once on the next week, then every other week following after. You are going to win by asking the questions and having a good personality. You have to do mirror and match. If I'm sitting there super rigid and up straight and, just not looking comfortable and being uncomfortable in my own skin, that vibe rubs off on people. If you're confident, you come in, you've got a nice cadence to your voice, just like I'm slowing it down, you match their voice, they make a joke, you laugh, you find something to make you guys similar, right? I'm always scanning when I come into a house. I'm looking at pictures, I'm seeing fishing pictures on the wall, I'm seeing camping pictures. I noticed a Harley was parked out beside the house. I seen a truck that was lifted. I've got all these reasons to not just talk about real estate, but start that relationship. Hey, Cole, is that your Harley out there? Yeah, it is. Awesome, man. Yeah, I just bought my first one about 2 years ago. I'm loving it. What kind is that? Starting the conversation. I see a picture of him holding a salmon on the wall. Awesome. Was that you? You go fishing all the time? You got your own boat? You got your buddies? Where do you go? What's your fishing secrets? Whatever it is, to make them feel comfortable with you. Then the real estate comes in. It's so much easier to talk about it when you've broken the ice. If you're one of those people that just come in and you grab your paperwork, knock on the door, hey, I'm Rick, nice to meet you, let's go in and get down to business. I'm going to do a quick walk through the house. I'll meet you here at the kitchen. Okay, boom, here's my paperwork. Yeah, I think the house is worth about $550. Would you like to get this thing listed and sold or what? Right? Like, there are a lot of D personalities. If I could run business like that, I would like to run business like that. Just getting to the point makes things a lot easier. I have to train myself with older generation, younger generation, people with accents, people that talk faster than me, slower than me. I have to be just like them to make them comfortable. You know what I mean? So I know it was a really, really long answer to your question, but there are quite a few things that come into play. But nothing comes into play more than doing it, right? Doing it. I didn't win my first one, my second one, fourth one, then maybe I think it was like fifth or sixth one, I got one. And then it was three more until I got another one. And then all of a sudden the ones I got started coming more because I'm doing these appointments so often. I now have a conversation in my head of how it goes. I know when to crack jokes. I know when to smile. I know when to ask personal questions. I know how to steer the conversation because of the scripts that I practice, right? So it's not just this simple seasoning that says if you do this and this, they're going to sign with you, right? It's this style that you need to adapt and make it your own, because we're all different. But soak up as much as you can from all the people that you respect in the industry and the ones that are killing it and winning. And you don't even have to be them 100%. Just take the pieces that you think are most like you that you could use. Take a couple pieces from somebody else, right? This whole job is rip off and duplicate, right? Somebody's already hiked the path to Everest. We don't have to go off the trail. It's in the MREA, right? It took however many years for the first person to get to the top of Everest, but after someone got there, every year there was I forget how many people make it up there a year now. But just like real estate, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. See who's killing it, see what they're doing, study what they're doing, ask questions, take them out for lunch, learn them, study their work habits, their business model, and do what they're doing. Guess what? It's a model. It works. If they're doing it, it works. Adopt it, make it your own.
Yeah, Love that. Yeah, and Cleo went on to say afterwards he's went on a couple appointments last week, and he said failed. I don't know necessarily what a fail means, but like Rick mentioned, it's a volume thing. It's a numbers game, and you're gonna have those first, might be your first 10, might be even your first 15 appointments that just go completely sideways and they don't go well. But at the very least, I feel like you should be coming out of each of those appointments with one thing to improve upon.
Yes.
And that's just, you build it up every single time and then it gets better over time.
You know, it reminds me, was it the Thomas Edison conversation about
Oh yeah.
people that gave him so much trouble about how many failed attempts at a light bulb, right?
Yeah.
But his response was, no, I learned 999 ways how not to build a light
Not to do it. Yeah.
bulb, right? So there's the positive thinking on it. Same thing, there are no failed appointments.
Hmm.
That's good. The more you go into them, you learn, hey, it didn't go over well when I acted like this. It didn't go over well when I said this. Maybe I should wait till this part of the conversation to talk about this. You're training yourself, you're learning. It's all educational. You know what I mean? I wouldn't walk into something and go, God, I failed at that. I'm never doing it again. No, I just gotta get all the ways not to do it out of the way.
Yep.
And then the rest, I mean, I used to be a nervous Nelly when I pulled up to my listing appointment or buyer's consults or whatever it was. I shared the story about my first listing appointment. I had my hands on their island in the kitchen, right? And I got my paperwork sitting there. I was so nervous. I lifted my hands up off their table and there was like 2 wet handprints right on the kitchen island, right? And I was just so mortified and embarrassed. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a nervous wreck. So it didn't stop me. You know, I walked through it. I talked through it. Now I'm so comfortable in my own skin and my abilities. I got music going. When I pull up to a listing appointment, I got my music going. My brain's listening to music. I'm not practicing conversation. I am confident that I did my paperwork. I know my numbers. I know what to talk about. And I've got a great conversation to have. Same thing with my buyer's consults. I kill it at buyer's consults. Kill it. I'd say probably 99% of the people that I meet with a consult work with me.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah.
Face to face. And I think for me, because I was in the same spot as you, Khalil, where I just didn't feel comfortable about it, is I prioritize 2 things: feeling comfortable myself, feeling okay with the meeting, however it went, even if I had questions that I didn't have answers to. Oh, we'll figure that out later. I've got some good resources. I can dive into that for you more later. Feeling comfortable with myself, but then also just prioritizing them as a human, prioritizing their needs. If you can just simply focus on those things in these meetings, I think that's going to take you so much further in the conversation, because you're just caring about what they say. And as long as you give them a solid response as a human in that way, they're going to value that so much more than the 1% listing fee that Redfin's going to throw at them, or any other numbers that any other agent's going to throw at them, because you're actually listening to them and prioritizing what they need from you in this situation. So there's 2 more questions I wanted to run through really quick here before we hit the 1 o'clock mark. If you had to name 1 or 2 resources today for any agent, new or 20-year veteran, what would be the 2 resources, whether that's on YouTube, a book, podcast? What would be like 2 resources you would suggest that somebody goes out and looks up today?
Oof. 2 resources. Well, I'm gonna go with the classic answer, and it's classic because it's always a great answer.
Sure.
That's the MREA.
Yeah.
The MREA, Millionaire Real Estate Agent book. That's great for real estate. That's great for business in general, right? Rich Dad, Poor Dad, MREA. Those are kind of my books. I needed a roadmap, a plan of not what might work or could work, what does work, right? What does work? So definitely the MREA. And then I would say the second piece that I would get into would be, oh man, there's so many so many good things. It's really hard to pick 2, but I would say the second piece would be something to do with an educational. I don't do that great with books. I do books when I need to and have to. But for me, My second guess or my second thing would be getting into as many classes as I could
Mm-hmm.
in whatever fashion that is. Just
Yeah.
classes, education. But remember, don't mistake movement for achievement, right? And I say this because a lot of people immerse themselves into so many classes that yes, it's good to be educated, but if you're spending all your time in classes, you're not out lead genning and out doing the business. And this is for me, I would catch myself. I'm like, am I going to this many classes because I'm trying to avoid work? That's a real question, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to tell myself, hey, you're doing these educational things. You need to do them. Yes, you do. And not but, and you need to be doing work too. So keep keep filling your cup with education in this line of work. It's going to take you very far.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. All right. And the way that I want to end out all these interviews, sticking to the name here, Simply Successful, what are three simple actions, or what are three actions that somebody can leave this meeting today, take action on these action items, and grow their business for the better moving forward?
I would say setting a schedule. Time
Mm-hmm.
block. This is one answer, is setting a schedule and time blocking.
Mm-hmm.
Have, having a roadmap of what you intend to do in business.
Yeah.
Daily, right?
Yep.
Hourly. And not to elaborate too much, but there's power in time blocking. Lead generation is not everybody's favorite.
Mm-hmm.
You heard the saying, eat the frog, right? Get done with the hard stuff first. There's something to be said about, whatever your checkpoint is, or having that time frame done for your lead gen. When it's done, it's done. You get to move on to lead follow-up. After that's done, you get to move on to appointments. After that, onto showings or whatever it is. So mapping and being specific on your day is huge, right? So that's going to be
Yeah.
number one. And you said three things.
Yep.
So having a plan, number one. Number two, I would say, taking a close look at what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and being honest with yourself on what those are. So, and that could be anything in business, right? What are my strengths? What am I good at? What do I really not want to do? And if I don't want to do it, ask yourself, why don't you want to do that? Whether it's cold calls, human interactions, being face to face, because it does take a certain person to be as forward as we need to be in this line of work. And I would say number three would be, takeaway would be a lead generation source. Find something that you're willing to do. And when I say willing to do, I mean give it time. Do not go out and knock on 5 doors and no one answered and you say door knocking didn't work. Don't make 10 phone calls on Thursday in the middle of the day when everybody else is at work and say it didn't work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pick one thing of lead generation and give it hell. I mean, give it your all. Give it your all. And don't fan out between 3, 4, 5 different lead gen styles. Pick one thing and give it hell for a month and see what your data and your return is. And if that doesn't work out at that time, then try something else. But if you start fanning out into too many, you're not going to give it your all and actually see how to make it work, or what the return would be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So recap: set a schedule or time block. Really just make priorities for not only the year, not only the month, the week, the day, the hour. Identify some strengths and weaknesses you have, be honest about them, and then set somewhat of a standard lead generation source for the next few months. You really got to play it out and see what the results are from that. So
That's
super
right.
cool. Rick, really appreciate your time today. We're going to get the recording out to everybody that attended and signed up. There'll be some social media posts that'll come out of this too. So again, thanks so much for your time today, Rick, and thank you everybody else for spending some time listening to us chat about how you can grow your business.
Love it, man. I had a blast. Well, look forward to your next clip.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Thanks, Rick.
All right, everyone have a great day.
Yeah, we'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.